Hello and welcome back to the Sunday special episode of the U Up Podcast. I'm Jordana Abraham.
And I'm Jared Freed. We are so excited. We have a very special guest. You know him from Loveline, Celebrity Rehab, Teen Mom, and more of all the things. Dr. Drew, thank you for coming on.
Pleasure to be here. It took a minute, but I finally got scheduled and I made it.
Finally.
Yeah. We're so excited to have you.
I've been trying for months to get in here, but thank you.
You've been knocking at the door. We're like,
no,
Drew,
you don't know. I have been. I absolutely have been. We're like, we can do it here. We can do it there. I'm like, we got to get this done. Please, I want to get in.
We're so excited to have you because I do think of this show, your show, Loveline.
Yeah.
It felt like, and I've been on your new podcast,
After Dark.
Dr. Drew After Dark. I was a guest on your show, had a great time.
That's, by the way, we got to be sure to promote that. You're right. This world would like After Dark a lot.
Yes, they would love that show. You get call-ins in the same kind of nature that we do emails here, but
but you're actually like an expert.
You're a real live expert.
Us, yes.
Right. We're a couple idiots talking out of our asses.
You know what? There really is no such thing as a relationship expert, really.
Okay.
There are people that do relational therapies and they're expert, but they may not know shit about dating or really what young people are experiencing, you know? So it's weird to me when people present themselves as relationship experts. I don't think such a thing really exists. So you guys are as expert as anybody.
Well, we always try to say, like, there's no experts, but we're just talking from our own point of view.
And that's important.
And it's a commiseration, so to speak, you know, because dating can be hard for a lot of people and lonely.
Let me mention one other thing before I forget, because my wife would kill me if I didn't. DrDrew.tv, I do a streaming show Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 3 o'clock Pacific time that she produces, where I've been interviewing a lot of really interesting people that have been silenced during the COVID pandemic. So got to interview RFK Jr. a couple times, Jay Bhattacharya a couple times, guys like that. Anyway, a little different audience, different thing. But if you're interested, check it out. I'm done.
There you go. Now, to see the dating world, you were on Loveline for all these years.
Yes.
And then I always say to people, I'm like, we're doing Loveline, but with the interaction with technology.
Yes.
Now, do you see the world now of dating and relationships and think this is so different than before? Or, you know, you have kids that are college age. You know, how old are your kids?
30.
College age. What the fuck am I talking about?
People graduate.
You have older kids that are dating. Yeah, they've graduated long ago. But they're in the dating world themselves. They must come to you and...
A couple of them are, yeah. Yep. And they don't come to you for anything, because I'm just dad after all. So it's the last thing that would happen, I think. But... And my daughter occasionally does, now that I think about it. She's now in recovery. She's been in recovery for a couple of years, and so I've been helping her with that. I know a lot about that process. And so now she does come to me as a resource.
Right. Well, it says here you're an addictionologist.
Yeah, that's one of the things I do.
So what is that exactly?
So I'm an internist. I did hospital intensive care medicine for years back when a general internist can do that. I did outpatient. I still do outpatient medicine. But along the way, I started working in a psychiatric hospital and ended up in 1991 taking over their addiction services and ran that program for over 20 years. And so I've been seen everything on that front too, as it pertains to treating and managing the addictive diseases. But all along, I was doing radio and doing Loveline all those many, many, many years. Started that in 1983, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
And so, yes, to your question, it has changed a ton.
Right.
A lot. And I've been born witness to all of it. The people are still the same, but the context of everything is just so different.
I'm sure. Well, I have a question about, in addiction. I'm not that familiar with the world of addiction, but I do know that there is a rule usually when you're like recovering that you're not supposed to date anyone for, I think it's a year.
A year, that's right. Mm-hmm.
And why is that?
Because it's typically... And my daughter struggled with that one a little bit, and now that she's out a year and a half, she's like, oh, I see now. So what happens when you get in a romantic attachment, and you're trying to grow and build? I mean, people in early recovery change a lot, and they have to change a lot. It's part of their process. And when you're changing, particularly your emotional landscape is changing, and you're in a romantic attachment with somebody, it's hard to change because there's a fittedness in romantic attachments, right? Mm-hmm. They really, I used to joke, but it's sort of true that an attraction is the sickest part of one person responding to the sickest part of another person. Right. And addicts have a lot of sickness to kind of get through to grow, to be autonomous and be able to manage their addiction. And so in that first year, you can date and you can hook up, but you can't get that closeness because it'll break up. It'll break up, or the other person will hold you as who you are when they first got involved with you. Okay. And you have to change so damn much. It's just not, it doesn't work.
I see.
See, I would think that it would be, a part of it would be hard to like look at someone who you're getting close to and go, well, now I'm different this week than I was last week. It almost adds like another hurdle to jump over.
In building any kind of relationship. That's right. Relationships are hard enough.
Right.
With that. Plus, to that point about relationships being hard, early in recovery, like meaning the first 3 to 5 years, what typically takes an addict back in their disease is a relationship. Relationship, like I said, it's where all of our stuff manifests. Whatever shit we got, it's coming out there. In fact, when I started doing Loveline way back, I was just doing general medicine at the time, and I was astonished how you could really see people's pathology come out in a interpersonal relationship. That's who we're attracted to, how we manage the relationship, how we're attached in the relationship, how crazy we get or don't get or whatever. That's all us, and it comes to bear in the interpersonal context.
Right. Well, that seems like almost a manifestation of what we traditionally think of as like a toxic relationship.
But it does. But we all have stuff, and it all comes out in relationships. Right. I mean, very few people are just strictly speaking super healthy. I mean, where nothing interesting happens in an interpersonal context. It's hard.
Now, I was wondering about this because we're talking about addiction. You don't hear about people being openly addicted to dating apps.
It happens. There's love addiction and sex addiction, right?
Yeah.
And that's where they act it out. In fact, when we treat that stuff, we have to clean their electronic instruments out. We have to make sure they're not watching porn, make sure they're not, doing whatever, hooking up with people. We have to go after that stuff.
What would you define as a love
Yeah, what is
addict?
the difference between like a love addiction and a sex addiction?
Love addiction, these are not technical diagnoses, right? They're constructs that allow us to help people that have these behaviors that they want to change. And love addiction is really kind of codependency, right? It's getting sucked into things too quickly, and in relationships you probably shouldn't be in, or better than, and yet you're just all the way in very quick, and you get the craziness comes, right? You get freaked out if they leave, and they cheat, all the back and forth that people get into in codependent relationships. And you do it again and again and again and again and again. And for women, when they do develop sex addiction, it usually comes in through love addiction. So they can't get what they need from their relationship, so they start trying to get what they can from the sex. That's going to give them their closeness that they're looking for. And that doesn't work either, of course, but then they get stuck in that cycle of feeling bad and then trying to get it filled with the sex. The men go straight to the sex addiction typically. Right. And if you're an addict, they're very prone to that stuff. It's just, again, you're compulsively acting out sexually in ways that you don't want to, and yet you keep doing it.
But we get an email all the time where it's like, I'm a young woman dating a guy, and then all of a sudden he's not deleted the apps yet, or I see him on there, and we're
those
dating.
Are red flags.
That was
Don't
my
ignore
question.
that. That's a red flag.
But that was my question. Like, what is the difference between like an anxious dater, someone with an anxious attachment, or someone who's just generally anxious dating, and someone with a love addiction?
It really is the repetition that they can't change their patterns, and that they really want to change the patterns, right? We all have some of this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And particularly when we're adolescent, right? That's sort of where that stuff kind of typically comes. People kind of are familiar with it, their first love or their first kind of thing in with relationships. These kinds of phenomenon come in very, very frequently. But normally as you mature, that kind of settles down a little bit, and you don't get so boundaryless in your relationship. Really, it's about having decent boundaries and between self and other.
Have you encountered men with love addictions, or are they just in the sex category?
Why do I keep getting pointed at every time sex addiction comes up? Yeah, it's just this guy.
That. Men get it too, for sure.
Okay.
For sure. Men get hurt. Men get really wounded when they're in that kind of pattern. They're very fragile inside with that stuff.
What do you mean? Like, expand on that.
If they're one of these, men will kind of shut themselves off oftentimes to those kinds of intimate connections that feel like deep, profound love, even when sometimes they're not. But we just sort of, we stay up on the surface sometimes because we're tender on the inside. It's just one of the things about men. They're very,
I always say that to women. I'm tender on the inside. Now touch me there.
You don't want to let anyone in.
Right.
You're afraid you'll get hurt.
Yeah, that's it.
That is.
It's that simple.
Do you think that's like a big, real reason why a lot of men, play these games, or it's seemingly so, or the fuckboy culture. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that.
I am a little bit.
Stat.
No, that's all they want. Yeah. They don't want anything else. That's why they do it. And women sometimes go, how's that possible? It's like, no, that's what they want. That's it. And so that's just, they stay right there. Now, ultimately, it depends how deep into that they get. I mean, the one thing that all the sex addicts I've ever treated say to me, without exception, is, I just want to have a relationship. So
they all say it.
They all say it. By the time they come to treatment, anyway, they know that they have an intimacy disorder, and they can't tolerate it. They sabotage it. They pick the wrong person, all that kind of stuff. And if you're a fuckboy, so to speak, great, good on you. But eventually, people get tired of that. Typically, healthy people.
I was thinking about it the other day. Like, first dates are easy, to get through. You can be whatever you want. It's the fifth date where you gotta be the real you, and that's where difficult decisions come in. Where I gotta make a plan with someone. I'm kind of held responsible for someone.
That's when you either get weird and ambivalent or ghost somebody. You just
because you have to deal with difficult stuff.
Well, because you're actually moving on in. Then it's like you're getting into something, and I don't know if that's what I want or not. I'm ambivalent. No, this dating app, there's something here. Why don't I just do that? This next shiny object. It's hard today.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Well, I think a lot of men that I've encountered or that I've spoken to seem to get into this thing where when they get to the fifth date or they get to a certain thing and then they see, they find flaws in the person they're dating and then they sort of keep replaying them until they need to get out. Like, I feel like they're being suffocated or someone something.
Yeah.
And why is that so common? I don't really.
How old a person are you talking about?
Well, the owe someone something, I definitely get. I mean,
get that too.
Myself, I get
when I was a kid.
Right, I get into me now. Where I go, third date, I'm gonna, now.
In fact, you start to feel guilty and ashamed and stuff. If you're not having those feelings, right?
Right.
Because you feel like you're just using people or being too exploitative or superficial.
Right.
It's not a good feeling.
Right, because we do get emails where it's it is funny because being the straight male voice here, where it's a woman will write in, I had my phase, I'm out there hooking up and everything was great now, and everyone's like, woo, go get it. And then they're like, I'm done with that. And then they're like, and now they're settled in, I'm looking for something real. And that's the pattern. It's very common. But then from the male side, it's if I was I'm out there, I'm just fucking, there's no choir of people, get yours. And, have fun. And then it's then you get into this dating mode where it's okay, well, if you've gotten past date 4, the only answer to this didn't work out is, well, you were just leading me along.
Right. You're bad.
That you're bad because it didn't work out.
You're toxically masculine. So this is the stuff that I'm hearing a lot more of these days, and I think you and I talked about this
a little bit.
You were on After Dark, is that men are, particularly, how old are you again?
38.
Yeah, particularly guys a little younger than you, are fearful of being seen as toxic, fearful of being I mean, they went to college during all the rape accusations and stuff, and they don't want to be associated with that. They're afraid to date a woman when they're using alcohol because somebody might accuse them of something. So there's a lot of anxiety and ambivalence in men of being seen as this thing that they, don't want to be. And yet, how do you avoid that? And how do you, it's really a hard navigation. And then even more difficult for them because they're then they just withdraw into pornography and things or prostitutes. First time I've heard that. I think we talked about that. I'm hearing more of that for the first time ever. That they're just they're just withdrawing. It's too difficult. I don't want to be seen as the bad person, and they just withdraw altogether. And then they don't learn the skill. This is a skill, dating. It's a thing you have to sort of know how to navigate and be honest with people and know who you want to spend time with and how to spend time with them.
Is the issue that their tendency is to treat women poorly? Because I'm kind of what is the big fear with interacting with women and speaking to women and dating women and just
They're
like
confused. They're just
and
confused.
just being like a nice, normal member of society.
But you're hearing it right. You're hearing it right here, which is that
Right,
by the
I
fifth date, maybe you've had sex even along the way, and they're like, "Oh shit, this isn't what I really want. What do
Right.
I do? I'm one of those guys. Oh
Right.
no."
I do understand there's someone listening right now going, boo fucking who?
Yeah.
You piece of shit. Listen, let me acknowledge.
that was going to be my next line.
Right.
No, I'm just kidding.
I acknowledge that but that response gets us nowhere. I understand
Correct.
where you're coming from,
Yeah.
Dr. Drew, because there is, again, the idea of like, rape accusation and alcohol, like that's even in an extreme way. I think like,
But it's not though for younger guys. They were reared on that's who they are as a man, and they don't want to be that.
right. I guess I get in the zone of like, what do I not want to be? I don't want to be this guy we dated and
Led me on.
Right.
It's the same zone.
And
It's all the
a
same
similar
stuff.
anxiety
Yeah.
zone.
Yeah.
Well, I think, but as you get older, and you seem to have improved a lot about this, and just like part of, I think, growing up is just not, saying things that you don't mean, saying things that you do mean,
Yes.
and not saying things that you think the person wants to hear, because I think
Correct.
that's what
Right.
gets you in trouble. If you're on a third date and you're like, I can't wait for you to meet my parents, and then you have sex with them, and then you break up with them the next day. Yeah, you're kind of painted as
You're going to be considered a piece of shit.
But
Right.
but the younger man, so is a good therapist friend of mine pointed out. He goes, look, she actually said, she goes, look, men want to have sex. If a relationship happens, great. Women typically want to have a relationship. If sex happens, great.
yes,
And so
it's an accurate assessment.
And the younger man like really want to have sex. they really some of them are quite desperate to do so, and so they may say things that they think they mean, but
Right.
they're under the sway of a motivational system that's affecting them.
I guess if you back away from all of it completely, what Jordana just said, like that, those are the skills that you need to learn.
Well,
Like,
you know what it boils down to, and you're absolutely correct, Jordana, which is honesty.
Yeah.
That's the honesty. The problem is, though, when you're young, it's hard. It's hard to know
Yeah.
exactly what you're feeling and what you're saying. That's why when you get older, that doesn't happen so much because you do know yourself. You are
Right.
more courageous, so to speak, in a interpersonal context, but you also have skill.
Right.
And if you don't do it a lot, you don't develop that skill. Like I used to love dating. I loved it. A lot of people hate it. I thought it was the best
Right.
time. Hanging out with somebody you're attracted to. I mean, that's how I looked at it. I'm just hanging out with somebody I want to spend time with. Not enough people look at it that way.
Right.
Right.
They look at it as goal directed. I got to have a relationship, or I got to have sex, or I got to have something.
Yeah.
You can actually learn about yourself and other people and what you want and what you're attracted to by just ask somebody, just make an effort
Have
to
dinner
ask
with
to spend time with people.
Also, some
healthy.
some dishonesty is more dangerous than others.
Uh-oh.
Right.
Well, the dishonesty of like, hey, I like you, I want to be in a relationship. Oh, never mind.
Yeah, but
is
sometimes
more
people-
dangerous than hey, I want to be in a relationship. I want to be casual, and then
Yes.
never mind, I want a relationship. Right.
Right. But you may not have been lying when you said one of those things.
Right.
Right. That's the hard part.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a two-pronged approach, right? I think it's one, like you said, men get older, they learn to be more careful with their words and not just saying things that they think women
just
wanna
have a
hear.
skill and they're present and they know themselves and their testosterone lowers a little bit.
Right. That also helps.
It does
But
help.
On the other side, I think what this show does a lot for, I mean, we have a mostly female base, but also we have some men too. But I think for the women, it's just teaching them how to be a better consumer of men.
So tell me about what's going on. I've noticed women, this was never a thing. There's sort of two things that I've noticed lately that are so vastly different from, say, the 80s when I was dating. One was we had a lot of fun. It was an emphasis on fun. We just
Right.
had a good time. And fun,
Right.
and dating was part of having fun. Sex was part of having fun.
Yeah.
People enjoyed themselves. It all seems very uptight and serious now. That's one side.
Mm-hmm.
And what was the other thing? And then younger women dating older men. That's astonishing to me. That's weird. I get why, sort of on paper why, but it's still astonishing to me.
Well, I think the less fun thing, I think that's because we added structure. There was the dating app adds a structure.
We would have had more fun with that.
I don't think you would have.
Oh,
I think
we
if you're on
would've.
a dating app
We
and you say
would've
there's a
hurt
lie
ourselves.
inherent, like I'm here to date, and then it turns into something. When you go on the first date from a dating app, it is way more an acting job than, hey, I met someone through a bar and I had, you have already gone through so many different reviews of who they are that they've checked off 17 boxes and now we've made it to date one. I don't know. It adds this like box onto it that you now are on the box trail. First date, second date, third date, fuck, like, whereas like meeting, like everyone feels better, I think, meeting
Jordana
in person.
just, I don't know if you call, I'm seeing her out of the corner of my eye. She looked at me like, is that okay? Third date fuck? Is that right? is that what are you going to sign off? She looked at me like, are you going to sign off on that shit?
Is that,
I did not sign off on it, but that's not uncommon.
Well, I'm just saying, like, I think that, when there's ambivalence, not ambivalence, when it's not as structured, you now get to have an unstructured hang. I think that helps.
But there was not as much hanging either. There was a lot of like, hey, let's
go on a date.
You, me, let's
go. A lot of dating. Yeah,
Right.
there was the whole hookup thing was getting going.
Right.
And it really took full bloom in the 90s. But in the 80s, it was let's hang out, let's go on a date.
I think it's because it's so much easier to get a date that you can feel maybe like more dispensable on the date. Like you can, because it's, if there's this feeling of I'm disposable, the next person's just a swipe away. And
that's new.
Right.
Yeah.
So then I think people kind of feel like, okay, I want to get out of this because I don't feel like good about myself when I'm doing it. Whereas
that or the market is coming to bear, like what else is out there,
right. And it's easier for someone to find out what else is out there as opposed to in the 80s, like you only really knew the people that you came into contact with.
You only had the things in front of your eyes. That was it. Yeah.
Right. And I guess there's an element of feeling special. This moment is special. Whereas, when
With the date back then.
Back then, right.
There was more. I've learned something about women's motivational systems that I never knew. And it was Christina P., Tom Segura's wife, pointed this out to me. And I thought, that is a really interesting insight. That the being chosen for a female has its own sort of thing to it. Men, we don't have that.
That's why you like the apps more.
We're sort of surprised when we get chosen. That's about all we feel when we get chosen. Like, what? Me? It's like, But women have it's a special thing.
Yeah.
And so if I was hanging you for 5 minutes and said, how about dinner tonight? That motive activates that
adrenaline,
activates that system.
Yes.
But being chosen on an app, I don't imagine does as much of that, right?
Yeah, and I think that's why women don't like to make the first move or pursue someone. It doesn't feel as good. It doesn't feel as exciting.
Isn't that interesting? It's such a subtle thing, but we don't talk about these things.
Well, and you also know it too. Like I know on a dating app, if I get that match and we're talking, and then it's like I can feel the clock behind me of when are you going to ask? Right. Are you going to make the move? Make a move here. If you can't do it here, you wouldn't have done it in person. Like you're automatically just this loser.
And I also think men get more excited when they've done the pursuing though too. Like we've talked about this with you, with people sliding into your DMs, and sometimes you go out with them and it never really seems like you're that excited.
That is a double-edged phenomenon, right? Mm-hmm. Because fundamentally, correct me if I'm wrong, we are lazy. And having somebody choose us who we really would choose, now we're good. The problem is when somebody chooses us who we're not really, maybe would not have chosen,
right?
We have no idea what to do. We don't even know what to do. Right. We just get confused and sort of like, well, they chose me, so maybe something's here I should try. You get weird as a male.
Well, that's a good point because, DM slides, no matter who it is, there is a thing in me where I go, Jared, why wouldn't you?
Why not?
Someone's coming to your, you're told your whole life, talk to her. Then someone comes to you and you're like.
But what if it really was somebody like, oh my God.
I would pursue it.
You'd be in. You'd be all the way in.
But
all the way in and you'd be delighted. Right. It's the on the fence part where you're like, I don't know what to do.
Right. I can't. Well, it's also like I'm not hungry, but I still got to eat because I'll be hungry again.
See, you've just I feel you. I'm sitting next to you, so I feel all your emotions. But he is telling you something true.
Yeah. No,
I've said it before.
I've heard it. Yeah, I've heard it.
Jordana knows.
Yeah, I'm inside the mind of a murderer, like I like to say. Yeah.
But I felt your body react to it, and it's a disappointment to really understand how men operate in terms of our motivational systems.
Right.
It's so simple. It's so simple. And things like hunger or evacuation or whatever, those are the things we're feeling. Those kinds of motivations. And then when something deeper happens, it's much, much better for us. We're of course very, very happy. But that's what's up front.
Well, I just think it's hard for like a woman of the time that we're living in, where you get all these messages, especially career-wise, especially these days. Pursue what, go after things, pursue things, get what you want, make the life you want.
Sure.
But when it comes to men, don't approach anyone, because that's going to be like a turnoff.
No, it's not a turnoff. No, most men appreciate it.
Or you might get into trouble because, someone who was not interested in you could see you.
You could, but I would argue it's worth the risk.
You think it's worth the risk?
I was just giving information so women know what they're dealing with when they do that.
Well, that's kind of why when I like, I always feel like people don't listen when we give this advice. But like when I'm like, but when you give a DM slide, put the guy in a position to give you an answer.
Like, be honest. I think a great question would be honest with me. If I'd come up on your dating app, would you have? What is it? Swipe right? What's the?
I would even right.
Would anyone say no?
Well, the point is if they're honest, they would go. You didn't immediately strike me as my type. I'm not sure. Something like that would be a nice.
I would even go further. I would put them in an actionable position that tells you that answer without having to say it. I don't think people are that strong to be that honest.
Okay.
So the actionable position.
Hey, here's my number. I'm down to go out for drinks next week. You give me a time and a place. I'm down.
So you're inviting them to do the work.
Do the work.
Right.
Make the house. I will live in it. If you build, here's the hammer, here's the nails, here's the wood.
That is how lazy we are.
That's how lazy we are. But again, like, because if I'm told that,
I think lazy is a really good sort of approach. Just
right.
we are fun. We get tired of pursuing, and we're hurt many times by it.
If someone messaged me, "Hey, I think you're cute," I go masturbate, fall asleep. That's the answer, though. I'm not going to build the house.
I think that's the fundamental difference. Like, I don't think many women would be
masturbate and fall asleep.
Interested in going out or just sleeping with having someone message them, and they'll be like, "Well, I would sleep with them, but I wouldn't date them, so I'll go out with them." Most women are not doing that.
Right.
Correct.
Right,
but
they're doing that because they see a resume.
But Jordana, you're saying something honest, that they're being sold a bill of goods that they're supposed to do what he's talking about.
Right.
And it just is not the same motivational system. It's not the same landscape for most females. Some can do it and are great with it. Fine, good for them. But not the vast majority.
And I agree with you. I don't think they shouldn't do it, but I think if you do it, you need to know how to read the situation much better than men do.
That's why we're trying to be honest about this and try to give them all the information. But do not deny what you're hearing today.
Right.
That's the part, because it's so disappointing.
If you're gonna
when you hear how we are, it's like, oh, really? Are they like that?
Right.
Yeah. Isn't it just him?
Well,
you gotta understand the enemy to beat the enemy.
Right. Well, that's what the most annoying friends of mine would always go, "Oh, that's just you," and I'm like, "Okay, don't believe me." I'm like, "We're telling you, there's a bear out there, and
here's how bears operate,
and here's a gun instead of a spear."
Yeah. Right.
You're going to want to use the gun, not the spear.
And you're not going to go, "Oh, well, that's that bear."
Right. Right.
This is how bears work. This is how they work.
Right. So we have an email here to go over.
Yeah, let's
do it. We're so pumped that Dr. Drew is here. This is so cool. I always said it. The prelude to You Up was definitely Loveline, having these open conversations, talking about things that are a little uncomfy to talk about. A little icky.
And by the way, back then, people don't realize that my motivation for doing that show was AIDS. Because at the time, Anthony Fauci was beating on us young doctors to get out there and educate. We were going to have 2 million dead. He kept saying 2 million dead if you don't get out there and talk about this. And so I went out.
That's so interesting. I thought Fauci was invented during the coronavirus.
No, he was my hero for many, many years. And so, I came on the show the very first night in 1983, and I was like, oh my God, there's adolescents and young adults calling this show about how much sex they're having, frankly, and they've not heard about this illness yet. We just started calling it AIDS. We were calling it GRIDS the year before.
GRIDS?
Gay-related intestinal disease syndrome.
Not as good a flow as AIDS.
And nobody knew. I was shocked. I thought, oh my God, we have to keep coming back and talking about this. And so that was my original motivation. And I wanted to create something that I would have wanted. I was 24 years old when I started, and I knew all this information was so easy and so digestible. And then it was hidden behind Latin terms and stuff. People were not taught it for no reason.
Well, it must have been a weird time when you heard of some sort of illness and you couldn't just Google it and find out all the information that one could ever want to know.
And
Like,
it was
there was nowhere to find the
hidden
info.
with scary language too.
Good and bad to that too. That you couldn't just Google and figure out your own way.
Right.
To, you know, like
really
it's good
true.
and bad.
It is good and bad, but it's better. It's
Right.
better. And you know, then everything had Latin name, venereal diseases and stuff. It was just very odd. It was scary, and I was like, "Hey, this stuff's easy." But there is one thing you
24,
need to know
Doogie
about.
Howser. How 24?
I was going into 4th year medical school.
And who says to you, get on the radio?
Oh, it's a long story. But anybody from Los Angeles? So in the 80s, in the 70s, the dominant radio stations were KLOS, KMET. And everyone kind of got bored with them as the 80s hit. And then the new wave came. And new wave, you know, this was Culture Club and Haircut 100 and all that stuff. I was laughing at a flock of seagulls. K-Rock was playing all this pirate music that no one had ever heard before. And overnight, they became this the dominant radio station in the dominant radio market in the country. And it was 300 yards away from my apartment. And so people I knew kind of were interacting with people at this radio station, and they had this late night show where they need to make it a community service show. And someone said, "Hey, Pinsky's in medical school, maybe he can do." And they had a stupid idea, like they were going to have me do a segment called "Ask a Surgeon." They go, "You'll use big words; it'll be really funny." I'm like, what the fuck are we doing? What am I? Why are you asking me this? But I said, all right, I'll go out and check it out. And here were all these really important health questions, medical questions, being presented to FM disc jockeys in the middle of the night, and no one talking about HIV. We didn't have HIV yet. We were calling it HTLV3 at that point.
You're in med school. Was there any fear that you would get? I mean, nowadays everything's so litigious that I would be like, oh, I don't have my accreditation. I'm not.
Yeah,
you have insurance for that. No?
Yeah,
right.
But it's actually, you kind of do and you kind of don't. I was naive. I thought I was in community service. It's actually, you know, the liability gets greater as you actually do have more credentialing, frankly, because you're expected to maintain a certain standard. And malpractice doesn't really cover it, which I didn't realize. Yet at that point in history, it was understood to be educational, and so there was no treatment alliance implied, and so you were just educating, and so there wasn't much liability associated with that.
What kind of surgeon were you?
I'm an internist by training. I did intensive care medicine and general medicine. Still do outpatient general medicine. Okay. But I went to that psychiatric hospital. I was doing inpatient, outpatient, intensive care medicine, and then running the medical services at the psychiatric hospital, and then doing the addiction services after that. And sort of stopped doing the hospital medical stuff, just doing outpatient medicine and addiction medicine. And then about 10 years ago, I stopped running a big program in addiction medicine. Still do plenty of addiction medicine, though.
See, I think you do like a service to make it like a more edible thing. Like it's got to be, you get negative feedback a little bit here and there. Does it frustrate you that like someone would say like, oh, everything has, you know, like I'm doing this because this is good. Like we do this show because we like talking about the subject and we like talking about the icky things with dating. We also do this show because we're paid to do it and we think there's a market for it. Yeah. Do you get frustrated when someone, you know, the internet obviously, like when they can't see the, you know, the grayness of all things, you know, that you're doing a service in the same way?
In the weird way, social media has done me a favor. It's made me very accustomed to just massive abuse coming my way day in and day out.
Everyone's opinion.
And and you sort of learn that people are just they don't even think about it. They even really understand what's going on. It's like, okay, you have an opinion, okay.
Right? And you just become callous to it, I guess.
Well, you just try to keep your compass right. You kind of keep doing what's right.
Right.
And if I can get paid for it, sure. I mean, it's like this.
I'll
is
take
a job.
the abuse. Everyone has a price.
Yeah. Right? Well, no, it's like this. There's you do jobs, and they do jobs, and I do jobs, and sometimes you get paid for it, sometimes you don't.
Right.
I did Loveline for 10 years for free.
For free?
Absolutely for free. I thought I was doing community service.
Okay.
And then at the end, when it was sort of dialing down, I did it for about 7 or 8 years for essentially free because I wanted to keep everybody employed. I wanted them to have their jobs. I had a lot of people kind of working on the thing then. And I was like, I'll keep doing it. It's okay, you know.
Would you get recognized at the hospital? Would they be like, you're the guy?
Well, I remember I didn't use my last name. And I did that because I didn't want to be seen as promoting myself.
That's interesting.
And I remember when one of my interns, when I was a chief resident, one of my interns found out I was that guy, and he freaked out. He couldn't get over it. Yeah.
And how long have you been married for?
32 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And how did you guys meet? Not on the apps.
Radio. No, radio.
Oh, you went on the radio?
Really?
She was running she won a fat bikini contest they had there, and then she ended
wow.
up. Well, then she ended up working in their promotion department and running all their models and stuff like that, and just.
So you didn't meet her on the radio, but she worked at the radio
She
station.
actually came on the show, and that was where it really I was struck by her.
Wow.
I had a weird, and it turns out I'd been struck once before and met her 2 years before, and had the French called coup de foudre. I just was like lightning strike, which had never happened to me before or since.
Oh, wow.
Happened twice with her, and in both times I felt compelled to talk to her or give her my number or something. I just had to do it, and eventually she.
What was your first date?
Laguna Beach restaurant there that we.
You were like, let's go on a date. Here's my number. How did it work out?
We were on and off for a few years. We were, 20s, man. People in their 20s just treat each other like shit. We had to kind of come to terms with that.
We or you?
Both of us. Both of us.
Yeah.
She's in bikini contests all over town. You're a big radio guy.
She only remembered my problems. I remember her problems. But anyway, I finally said, look, in your 20s, you just don't. I was an idiot, and that's that. So she was on the show. She says, I said, here's the love, you're the love of my life, which I don't remember saying, but I can imagine I would have said something like that. I thought I was being very coy.
She wrote it down.
And when she went out to the car at the end of the show, I said, look, I know you have a boyfriend. I would not do this, but I just take my number. Just please, I just feel I have
she had
to
a
give you your
boyfriend.
number.
Okay.
Yeah, just take it. If something happens there.
What a dopamine rush that is.
Yeah.
I know you got a guy, but I got to have you.
And I was like, I felt bad about it, actually. I don't like being that guy. And then I kind of let it go, and then she called. And then we talked a little bit, and then we met at my favorite place in Laguna at the time.
She broke up with her boyfriend?
She was in Newport Beach, where she kind of grew up. She had broken up at that point, but they were kind of that messy shit that goes on.
Okay.
Yeah, that went on for a while. So yeah,
the truth isn't all clean and dandy.
I like it.
I like it.
It feels like very real. And what is your secret to being married this long?
We had sex on the first date. That was
First date.
That's the secret. Okay,
That's
for all the
Well,
listeners out there.
For people who say that that's never good, it's just sorry. It was
Yeah, I mean, I don't believe in that rule or any rules.
No, I think no. It worked for us.
Right?
It worked for us. And
how's sex? Oh no!
Well, that's one of the.
I thought we were getting close.
No, but listen, that's one of the things that kind of bonded us up. I mean, that's an important part of a relationship, and for us, it was a very significant piece, and remains so to this day.
If the kids are listening,
they're used to us talking about our shit on After Dark and stuff. She comes on After Dark. And
really?
And talks about it, and it's almost embarrassing how into each other we are. But that was there from the beginning.
Right.
And so I would argue that if you can find that kind of, now often the problem is oftentimes that's craziness on craziness, right? That's often
sometimes the most sexual attractions.
Sometimes that's from
toxic,
the worst part of us and the worst part of the other person. Fortunately, we were crazy enough that we could work it through, but not so crazy that it was just that. And so, yeah, we had ons and off and this and that and back and forth. And I did years and years of therapy. She did therapy, and now it's a significant glue in the relationship.
Okay.
And everything works, and we're very happy. And the way I say it to married couples is, look, if you're as happy today as you were yesterday, the probability is you're going to be that kind of happy tomorrow also. And so it's like Alcoholics Anonymous, one day at a time.
Right.
One day at a time.
There it is. That. Who doesn't want to get married now? Comparing it to alcohol.
Well,
it's too late for me, Jared.
You're out.
Yeah, but that's the other thing. People not getting married is awful. I by the way, we my generation sort of invented that. And
not getting
yes, or delaying it and all that. And I thought we had and I was not alone in this thinking that you had your fun and then you got married and then you died. That was sort of how we saw marriage.
Right.
Like that was sort of the end. And I'm here to tell you, it was astonishing to me on the altar how elevating it was to make a commitment in front of God and everybody, and how into it I was up there. I was shocked. That it was so. I was.
Do you think
shocked.
that's very male? Because we've talked
like
about this before. This idea of like, guys being dragged to wherever the next step is, and then getting there and going, "Oh, it's pretty good."
Now I'm in.
Now I'm in.
Not just pretty good.
Yeah.
Yes,
I found that with my husband too. I felt like he was like, I was the one who was trying to like move things forward faster and faster.
She was the same with mine.
But then once I got him, he was like
It was
fully in.
It was weird. It was. I'm sure he must have experienced what I experienced, which is that you just don't know. As a male, I guess you don't appreciate what that is. You don't know that transcendent thing that you can achieve with somebody else, and it's just there. It's just been there ever since. And so for people to miss that, I think, is an awful thing. It's sad, and certainly in terms of, again, talk about glue in relationship and child rearing environments that are healthy. You need all that.
Right.
You need that kind of stability.
Right. Well, it's funny you say that in your day you feel like it was, you had fun and then you got married and then you died.
That was it.
Now I feel like
That's how we saw it.
The consensus seems to be like you have fun, you get married, you have kids, and then you die. Like that's when all the fun ends.
Yeah.
To be
Well, that's sort of correct. But
you're like, we've got it right. Okay.
but here's the news. Here's the interesting part. I will shed some light on that part. It is things hit a nadir during child rearing years. That's statistically true.
What's a nadir?
A bottom of happiness.
Okay.
The bottom. The things hit a
opposite of the
low.
peak.
Yeah.
Okay.
Literally the opposite of the peak.
Okay.
What year of the kids?
It's somewhere in late childhood and then again in adolescence. Those are the two you can imagine, right?
Okay.
Those are the two down periods. If you have what we have, which is I wish for everybody, it sounds like you guys have too, Jordana, is it's all there when they go away. And
Okay.
it's so fun. It's so great then. It's wonderful when they get
When they're
out.
gone.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that why
The
you
best
see?
part about having kids is when they leave.
That's to get them out of here.
Well, the happiness returns. Let's put it
Okay.
that way.
Well-
We were like, oh my God, that's right. We really like each other. Holy
funny.
shit, it's fun.
I guess you're busy with the kids stuff, the games, the schools,
Everything.
and then
money and they can't, everything. It's just
will we make it
stressful.
through it?
Yeah,
right.
stressful.
I guess that's why people get divorced. Like when the kids are out of the house, they go, "We're divorced," and they don't even get that chance to realize that.
I guess that's
maybe
what it is. I don't know. Or a lot of people, when I see these divorces and things, you shouldn't settle. You should really be into the other person. That's what I tell my kids. I mean, there should be no doubt in your mind.
Right.
You should be. This should be the kind of clarity you have about nothing else in life. Have clarity about the person you choose to build a family with.
Let's do an email. We
wanna read it?
Here with Dr. Drew. I'll read the email. You ready? J&J, let me get right to it. My boyfriend, 38 male, and I, 27 female, have been together for a little over a year and have lived together most of the time. Yes, I know we moved in very soon. On to the current issue. My boyfriend and I were recently on a hike, and I noticed a circle-shaped container in his pants pocket. I figured it was a mint container, but I was going to make a joke about it looking like a dip container chewing tobacco. Before asking for a mint. To my surprise, when I asked for the circle container what the circle container was in his pocket, he got weird and said, "Don't worry about it."
Oh,
That would make me worry about
When
it.
your partner gets weird, that is never good.
Right. Weirdness.
Never good.
Understandably, I then worried about it, and I laughed and said, "That was weirdly cryptic. What do you mean?" He continued being weird and said, "It doesn't matter." I was super confused, and when he turned around and said it was spitless tobacco. Apparently it's like chewing tobacco, but comes in a little pouch and doesn't make you need to spit. I kind of thought he may be joking, and he's never mentioned using tobacco or nicotine products before. He's almost obsessive about living healthy and rarely even drinks. So this was very baffling. I asked how long he has been using tobacco, thinking maybe it was a very recent. He said about 15 years, and he used to smoke before switching. He goes on to say it's been weighing on him to keep this from me, which all I heard was he didn't just happen to not bring it up. He actively hid it from me every day. I asked why on earth he would hide this for so long, and he said that once we first started seeing each other, a friend of ours used chew tobacco, and I said it was gross. I remember that night, and I didn't give some speech about my hatred of tobacco. I literally just laughed and said, "Ew, that's gross." He continued on saying that when we went on a week-long vacation a few months ago, he didn't use it at all. I asked if that was because there would have been no way for him to hide it then, and he admitted that yes. I asked if he ever would have told me if I hadn't happened to ask about the container in his pocket. He didn't say yes or no. Instead, he said he was been trying to quit while we've been seeing each other, so he really wasn't hiding anything.
How long have they been together?
A year?
Yeah, this
Yeah.
is weird.
Live together.
So what's her question? Let's get to it.
If he had mentioned it at the beginning, I wouldn't have
enough of
stopped
the
saying
War and Peace here.
Right. I would have made fun of him whenever he used to make it. Now, since it's been this drawn out secret he's been keeping, I don't really know how to handle it. Is his solution to anything that might... What is his solution to anything that might upset me just to hide it and hide it away and lie? Follow-up email a couple days. Look, she's writing more. I asked today how often he uses the nicotine pouches, and he said constantly. He went on to say that he basically has always had one in his mouth all the time. He would secretly remove it when we got intimate. I remember times I have commented that he tasted funny during spontaneous intimate moments when he would shortly excuse himself to the bathroom. I also found out that his friends and some of our mutual friends and coworkers have known, and he specifically told them not to tell me. So it's literally just me that he decided to actively hide this from. I still can't understand why he decided to go through such lengths to hide it in the first place. I find it very embarrassing that my boyfriend has been telling people to keep secrets from me. So red flag or deal breaker. Your boyfriend has kept his nicotine habit a secret from you every day for the entire time you've been together. Sincerely, addicted to your love. What do you think?
What do you think?
It's not a deal breaker.
Okay.
It's symptomatic of something that happens when men typically do this. They want to be seen in a certain way. They want to push things forward. They don't show some little flaw, and then it becomes fixed. Like, on how am I going to ever reveal this, right? And then it gets in their head, and they're freaking out that if she knew this, she'd leave me. And in this case, and I'm sure it's what he convinced himself, because she said she hates chewing tobacco, whatever she said. Right. And so in his case, he went, I need to stop this. I want to stop this. I'm going to stop this. And I'm not going to spend the energy of explaining this to her. I'm just going to stop. Didn't go so easily is the problem.
Right.
I think it's his nicotine addiction that's the problem. And the smokeless nicotine addiction is the worst. It's the worst of all. It's the most powerful one. Okay. They're the high concentrations. He's using a snooze, it's called. Those are. I took I tried one of those for a minute one time. My head almost came off. I wanted to throw up.
Really?
I couldn't believe it. And guys use it for appetite suppression sometimes too, but they are extremely addictive. And so the only way he's really going to get off if he switches to gum and lozenges and all this stuff. And he's probably tried to cold turkey, but he can't. And he can't do the lozenges and the gum because she's going to wonder, why are you doing that all of a sudden?
So he's on the highest form of it because it's the most easy to hide from her.
Well, he probably thought it was a lot easier to stop than he's now found out it is.
Right. Well, it's funny that you're speaking to like my being right now. The idea of like not going to bothering her is way more work than me just fixing this addiction.
And it might ruin things. I don't want to ruin things. I like where this is going.
Right.
And I'm gonna stop this terrible habit anyway. I mean, he's deluded himself. I'm sure that all the self-talk was like that. That's how addicts work. That's how any kind of addiction works. You start thinking, I'm going to be a better person for this person who I love now, and then it doesn't happen.
But hasn't he now like broken this trust with her?
Well, that's the problem. Okay, that's her. Now on her side,
yeah.
on her side, the question is, now you start thinking, what else is he lying about? What's going on here?
Right.
Blah, 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 blah.
It's a mess.
She gave us enough information that I really doubt that this is part of a global problem of him being a liar. It makes you wonder about that. She should bring it up to him. Why should I trust you about anything? This really crawls into question. You went through an elaborate ruse here. I feel sort of taken advantage of, or whatever she feels. She felt ashamed and embarrassed,
right?
Which is an interesting kind of way to feel about this, but okay. And put it back on him. See what he
it's
says.
like I got a mouse problem, bring in the cat. I got a cat problem, bring in the bobcat.
Right, well,
I got a bobcat problem, bring in some guns. Like
he's clearly I feel like you're addicted when you're going to these kinds of lengths to hide it from the person.
Right. It's very addictive.
Yeah.
The smokeless tobacco is tough.
Right.
Thank God. I mean, it's terrible for you. You get head and neck cancers and stuff from it. It's bad.
But your perspective on this is something that I never would have, like the idea of like, I do understand. I'll fix this. She'll never know the difference.
Yeah.
And then I don't. And then you go, okay, how am I going to fix this? I'll just get some heroin. You know, like you got the highest form of tobacco.
Well, maybe that was the whole time.
I think that it might have been the whole time.
Oh, okay.
He just said he got to that from dealing with the cigarettes and everything else, and that's what people do. They give themselves these powerful systems to try to avoid the things they're trying to stop. And now he's got to stop that. And if you go, well, now I'm going to stop, and then he can't.
Well, here's my other question. It's like, are all addictions made equal? I think no. right?
It depends what you mean by that, but I would say generally speaking, I think I know what you mean, and they all trigger the same biology,
Right.
but they have each their own natural history.
And different consequences, I think, too.
Mm-hmm.
Like this addiction to me seems like different than if let's say he had a sex addiction or he
Correct.
had a
Has no consequence on
alcohol
anybody
addiction.
except him.
Right, yeah. There's no consequence,
Right.
which to me makes it different than finding out someone was hiding a different kind of addiction, which could have issues in a different way negatively for
True,
you.
and she needs to like look at that. That would be an
Right.
important series of questions to ask him. Have you ever had a problem with alcohol? Does anybody in your family have a problem with alcohol?
Right.
Those sorts of questions. But people are weird about cigarettes. I mean, that's like this
Mm-hmm.
ultimately gross thing now for people to do. And so I understand why he's ashamed of it.
Right.
He's ashamed of it.
Well, now to take this all the way back to the beginning of the show, you said take a year off from a relationship.
It's not. This isn't that.
So what-
Nicotine is not that.
So how does one, when in a relationship, you just found this out, you want to help them through it? How would they? What's the best route for that? I agree with you. It doesn't seem like he's lying about anything else.
Yeah.
But this, and I understand
Because
why
she would have been telling us about all these. Now I wonder about this, and now I wonder about that.
Right.
It seems a little dicey over here. No, she didn't tell us that.
Right, and I understand why her head goes that way, but
Yeah,
I
me too.
think we're all warning against that a
Yeah.
little bit. What would you be? What's the advice for her now?
she
You're
can't-
day one with an addict.
If she.
I don't think it's
Okay.
bad.
He's dependent.
Yes.
Okay.
There's a difference between addiction and dependency, right?
Okay.
You can take nicotine, and any human can be rendered dependent, severely dependent. You can take any human and put them on morphine and make them dependent. An addict is someone who starts escalating and having all kinds of consequences and goes to other things when they try to stop and then can't stop and can't stay stopped. It's just that nicotine is one of the ones that's tough to stop and stay stopped. It's very, very difficult, whether you're an addict or a nicotine dependent individual.
Right.
The addicts, though, have more trouble stopping the nicotine, typically, because they have that genetic setup where, that do it again part of the brain is more geared up for this kind of thing. So again, it's important that she asks those questions
Right.
about the family background.
So yeah, I mean, I think this is much more about like her figuring out, can I just like generally trust him? Because I was thinking this almost feels like more akin to like finding out that your boyfriend had an ex-wife that he never told you about.
It
Right.
goes there, at least
Yeah.
in your fantasy. It goes there, right?
Right.
What
Like
else?
Yeah. Or just like in sense, because to me, this is something that was hidden because she wouldn't like it, but not necessarily because it's a marker of something so terrible that he's doing or has
Correct.
done.
Correct.
It's
But-
just something that someone feels ashamed of. So it's almost, it seems so much more about like him and his insecurities.
and
than,
why didn't you tell me? Kind
Right.
Of thing.
Yes.
Yes.
So I mean,
My mother had a separate family and life I never knew about till I was like 55 years old.
come on.
Yeah.
Were you upset when you found out?
Not really.
Separate family?
My feelings in relationship with her were complex.
Okay.
And I had lots of therapy by that point. I was like, oh, perfect. They made like, okay, now. But I do remember as a kid thinking that there was something wrong with me, as kids always think. Like, was I adopted or something? I had this funny feeling. Like, what's
Like
going
there was
on?
something more to the story
Something
of
missing
your
that
family.
I'm, of course, responsible for. I must have been adopted or something, I was thinking. And it turns out she had a stepson and, was married for 10 years.
Okay.
And I called the stepson, talked to him for a while. He was a retired dentist from Stockton. And very
Two
interesting.
doctors.
Very, very
Jewish
interesting.
woman's dream.
She's not Jewish.
Oh,
She's not Jewish.
never mind.
But she was a mess. And she was the fifth husband, it turned out, of a fifth wife of a silent film star who absconded from Philadelphia with her when she was 18.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Terrible. So she must have been ashamed of all that.
Right.
So we never found out if my dad knew it.
Never.
Don't even know.
Oh my God.
My sister was freaked out. I was not. I was like, this is who this woman is. This
You
makes
kinda
perfect
knew
sense.
this was-
I mean, I
Perfect
think it's
sense to
true.
me.
Like those things, I feel like obviously, like in a bubble, you tell someone something that it seems like shocking. But I guess when you have the context of your entire relationship with someone, sometimes those things are like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah,
Right.
That's who that person is.
Yeah.
Hiding things. She's always been that way, and she's never been forthcoming with anything. So
Oh
there we
my
go.
God.
I feel bad for her, right? I can feel empathy for her. I mean, the shame of divorce back in the 50s
Right.
and
Right. Well,
trying to
that's
hide all this weird stuff.
to bring it back to
Yeah.
the email. I
Yeah.
guess it's like, can you feel empathy for this guy who felt, so ashamed of this thing that he felt he needed to hide it?
Right. At least he doesn't have a second family. That would be my.
And at least, I think at least when she called him out, when she asked him what's in your pocket,
Yeah.
He didn't dig deeper into the lie. He just said he probably like wanted to tell her so he could stop thinking about hiding it from her. I imagine
agree.
as well.
I agree.
jig is
Because
up.
now, by the way, he's capitulating on the fact that a year in, that he's probably not going to stop easily either.
Right.
And so
Right.
now he knows that too.
And that's almost
And
like the
so-
first step, I
Yep,
think.
Yep. I agree.
Right.
So their first step in their recovery, they're on the way.
Listen, I think we help these people.
I think so too.
Well, we
Dr.
told
Drew.
her to stay with it.
Stay with it.
We're
Stick it
clear
out.
on that. All
Let's
three of
figure
us.
this out together.
Yeah.
This is now you guys together. Let's figure this thing out.
Work
it's
through
it's
it.
above him.
It's a issue, but it's not a red flag.
Right.
Yeah.
Or deal breaker, as we
Deal
say.
breaker. Yeah, it's not a deal
Yes.
breaker. For sure, not a deal breaker.
Dr. Drew, this was fantastic.
was
Thank
Good.
you.
I'm glad it was good.
Thank
I'm
you.
glad it was helpful.
It's
This
so
is
cool.
great. And remind everyone where they can find you, where they can find your show.
The best thing is drdrew.com. I still do with Adam Carolla 3 days a week. He and I are still doing pods. I have my own podcast there as well, which is more sort of sciencey based. Then I do that streaming show at drdrew.tv. Check it out if you're at all interested in all things really sort of the craziness of the last 3 years, and particularly people that have been silenced in social media. I immediately, instinctively want to go interview them, and I've learned something from every one of them. And then finally, After Dark, which we have done, which is
I had
at
a
your mom's
blast.
house. It's sort of that's the more love liney type show. That's and were we taking calls at the time?
We
that you-
took some calls.
Yeah, we take calls also.
It was a lot of fun. I don't think it's come out yet.
Is that right? It's
yeah,
still,
I think it's still
He's like, we canned that.
right.
episode.
Yeah, we
You
threw
were
that one away. I
no,
thought I did something wrong.
well, there's that, but I know I have to get way ahead because it's in Austin, Texas,
Yeah.
and I live in Southern
well,
California. I have
okay.
to go there and do a bunch of them.
Do it there. I
Yeah,
got it.
yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, it was a blast. I really enjoyed
It
myself.
must be coming up soon.
es-
If not, I thought for sure.
Especially as a fan, it's just such a cool thing to to meet you and be able to like shoot the shit and
It was
have you
great. We
here.
had a
This
great
is-
time.
Yeah, this is fantastic.
This is awesome. Thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure, guys.
We'll be back on Wednesday.
Boom.
The U Up podcast is produced by Sean Kilby, Maddie Paul, and Jorge Morales Pico. Editing by Jorge Morales Pico. Social media by Maddie Paul. Be sure to follow at u.up.podcast on Instagram and send us your emails to uup@betches.com.